everyone, I am Kimberly, the 5-Minute NP. The 5-Minute NP was born out of my belief that small, incremental changes can drastically change the trajectory of your life. Our genes do not have to determine our lifespan. My goal through this podcast is to act as a roadmap that bridges the gap between knowledge and action, leading to you living your healthiest, happiest, longest life. Welcome to the 5-Minute NP podcast. Hi everyone, I'm Kimberly Heffernan. I'm a family nurse practitioner and host of the 5-Minute NP podcast. This episode is all about anxiety, and I am not too prideful to admit that I struggle with anxiety, and I know many of you do as well. So I was so happy to find my guest today, Barbara Heffernan. Barbara is a psychotherapist, an EMDR consultant, international life coach, course creator, entrepreneur, and founder of Awaken Joy, where she shares her mission to help people worldwide live a more joyful life by overcoming anxiety and past traumas. She uses advanced integrative techniques in combination with psychotherapy coaching and Buddhist philosophy. Today, we talk a lot about anxiety, as well as identifying our inner core beliefs, ways to heal them, overcoming our negativity bias, how we know we have an actual anxiety disorder, ways we can handle social anxiety, and what really works with anxiety, and can we really overcome it? Well, thank you for being here. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share the podcast. My goal is truly to help you live your healthiest, happiest, longest life. Welcome to the 5-Minute NP podcast. Welcome, Barbara. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Kimberly?
I'm doing great. I am looking so forward to this conversation. I think it's going to help so many people.
Me too. Me too.
So
yeah, I've been loving listening to your podcast and the variety of topics you cover. It's great.
Yeah, it's like all things health, wellness, so many things in our life that have to do with our health, actually, from our mental health to physical, everything. So I know you've transitioned through the years as far as your career, and I was reading your bio, and it's like you started out as like a successful banker and ended up, I love your bio because a lot of people, I think, go through that where they just find themselves in this place that, you know, maybe they don't find their work meaningful. And so it's so cool that you actually jumped out of that and didn't just continue living life like that. You actually dove into something that, you know, became more meaningful work for you. So I thought we could just start there where tell us a little bit more about yourself and Awaken Joy, its mission, philosophy, what your mission is with that.
Awesome. Yes. Awesome. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I started my career in investment banking, mergers and acquisitions with really some of the biggest houses at the time. And I really fell into that. You know, I was right out of college. I kind of fell into it. I did go back to business school, went back into it. I was very good at it. It was very exciting and challenging and interesting, but it was definitely not soul satisfying. And throughout my 30s, I just did a lot of soul searching and research and met with a career coach. And, you know, I did all sorts of things to try to figure out what I wanted to do. But when I quit Wall Street, it did really feel like jumping off of a cliff. Like it was a scary thing. I was sole support of my family at the time. Actually, I had 3 kids, and I had this crazy idea. I wanted to go back and be a psychotherapist. So I went back to school, loved being back in school, really enjoyed it, loved the coursework, and came out and had to go through a number of things to get trained, right? After you do your education, you then work in agencies while you collect your hours and get supervision. And eventually I opened my private practice, and I specialized with anxiety and trauma. And I loved the work for many, many years. I am definitely somebody who likes to change things up, you can probably tell. And after doing that for about 16, 17 years, and there is a parallel story here, but I'll try to keep this short. But after about 16 or 17 years, I began to realize that I wanted to challenge myself in different ways. I also began to see the limitations of therapy. Like, I think therapy can be super impactful for people, very, very much. Yet there are integrative tools that I felt there were a lot of resistance on the part of clients trying things that were not therapy, trying to actually take action. I'm a very action-oriented person. So I began to integrate more coaching into my work. I began to bring in mindfulness meditation. And I also felt that I was spending a fair amount of time in my sessions providing psycho ed, which is part of what a therapist does, but like explaining concepts. And I felt like, well, if I put this on YouTube, I could point my clients to it. They could watch the videos, and then our sessions could be more productive. Mm-hmm. And actually, as it ended up, many of my clients weren't all that interested in watching the YouTube videos, but I developed a huge following on YouTube separate from that. So I've moved my business more and more towards the YouTube channel, towards coaching. The parallel story is that I began meditating when I was about 31 years old, which was in 91. So a long time ago, before it was like the rage. Mm-hmm. And it became a huge part of my life, a huge part of my own healing. I became very invested in Buddhist philosophy, as more as a philosophy, not as much as a religion, but I became very involved with a couple of organizations. And I really felt that these other healing techniques and modalities were very important to my life and to other people's lives, mm-hmm. because spirituality, whatever that means to you, is an important part of healing. Mm-hmm. So I developed my YouTube channel to really integrate psychotherapy techniques, meditations, and Buddhist philosophy, coaching techniques. And the goal of the channel is to help people live more joyful lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really how I found you. Is I was going through a lot of anxiety myself. And, and I'm going to mention it a little later, but just about this whole anxiety thing. I mean, it's like, there's all these different things you should be doing. And then you almost get anxious when you're not, I know I should be meditating. I know, but it's just like, you're so wound up in this whole anxiety cycle. So it was funny. I found you and I was just watching you on my way home from work, listening. And it's like, you helped me so much. And I'm like, I have to talk to her. She can help so many people. And I love Awaken Joy. I love that title because so many of us let fear, excessive worry, and anxiety just rob us of our joy in our lives. So It's the perfect title. So why do you think we're so anxious? I feel like even more than just COVID, just in general, so many people deal with anxiety. So I guess I'm just kind of asking like the root causes, like, why are we so anxious?
Well, that's a very big question. I do feel that, first of all, anxiety is a useful emotion at times, right? So anxiety is anticipating a problem in the future and then thinking about what can you do about it. So it can be adaptive, right? If you're in a challenging situation and you have a little bit of anxiety about it, you think things through, you focus, right? Anxiety, you're a nurse, you know all this, right? Increases your adrenaline spikes, your cortisol kicks in to bring your adrenaline down, right? Adrenaline helps you focus. Mm-hmm. And prioritize. So there's an element that a reasonable amount of anxiety is normal and adaptive. And I think that what has happened in our society, and I'm actually feeling this is worldwide, really. I mean, I have listeners in all countries all over the globe, and everybody's struggling with the same issues. There's so much that we are aware of now that's out of our control. Mm-hmm. And where anxiety becomes a problem is when it's something totally out of our control. So if we get a little anxious, like let's say preparing for this talk, I feel a little bit extra anxiety. I'm like, okay, I'm going to read through the questions. I'm going to think about it a little bit. And actually, prior to getting on the call with you, I took a few minutes to diaphragmatically breathe, just kind of settle in. Again, that kind of thinking in the future, if it's something I can control, helps me take steps to be more productive and functioning, right? But if I'm worried about something I can't control at all, then I just spin and spin and spin. And we are not taught about how to not do that. Mm-hmm. And given news and kind of our worldwide connection, there's all this anxiety. We just learn about so many things that are like way out of our control. So I think it's just spinning. Right? Mm-hmm. The whole world is spinning out of control with anxiety.
I see it in my practice. I mean, some of these little older people. Just the other day, a lady, her blood pressure was so high. And I was like, are you going through some stress? She's like, the news, it just made me shake this morning. It just upset me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is really affecting people and just what we consume. And it's like, there's this, we need to know what's going on, but then the effects are so bad for our health. And for many of us, it's like, we're just constantly worrying about everything. And it's hard to kind of get out of that pattern or that cycle.
Yeah. And obviously we want to be concerned about what's happening in the world and then think through, what can I do about this? Mm-hmm. Some of us might write a letter to the editor of a paper, right? Or we might donate to an organization that's helping the world in a way we want to help the world, or we might get politically active. There are steps we can take, right? But if we really get stuck in worrying about things that we can't do anything about, that's where it really gets out of control. And that's also, remember, we talked earlier about the adrenaline cortisol. If your adrenaline spikes and the cortisol kicks in, and then that brings the adrenaline down, but before the adrenaline can come down, it spikes again and again and again. Your cortisol never drops. And elevated cortisol leads to all sorts of health problems. Mm-hmm. So making sure you take time, like even the 15 minutes I took before our call, where I just I laid down with an ice pack on my shoulder. I hurt my shoulder recently. So I just laid down with the ice pack. I put on a podcast. I just did a little deep breathing. I just took a 15-minute break, let my body calm down, reset. Mm-hmm. It's so important to do that, right?
Well, and I think it's a lot of self-awareness. I don't know, but when I was going through some really last year, P school was really hard. I was really stressed. And then people, you just keep going and going and going, and you don't take time for that. And I feel like it just builds on itself. Almost, I was going to ask you, what's the difference between just having an anxiety and a panic attack? I mean, what's going on there, and why is it so overwhelming where that, okay, this is just anxiety, this is just a panic attack, but still you can't get out of it. It's like you're just in it.
Yeah. So panic attack, and you probably are aware of this, panic attack is used frequently when it's not necessarily a panic attack, right? Have you seen that in your practice a little bit, where people might say, oh, I had a panic attack, but what they really meant is they got emotionally overwhelmed and collapsed in bed, right? Mm-hmm. But a panic attack is really that feeling that your heart's racing out of control, you are in danger, like something's going to happen. That's why people with panic attacks end up in the emergency room. Mm-hmm. So panic attack is one of the best examples of fear, mm-hmm. right? The saying, like, the main thing to be afraid of is fear itself, right? When we have anxiety and we then anticipate anxiety, we're already creating the anxiety cycle. So a client of mine who would have panic attacks in the car, simply thinking, particularly on the highway, tomorrow I have to get on the highway to drive my kid to this place my kid needs to go. The day before, she's already creating that adrenaline cycle in her body. Simply anticipating it, right? Mm-hmm. So you really need to learn to calm it down at that very first piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually do that if bad weather's coming. I was in a rollover car accident when my little guy was 10 months old. And now if this ice is predicted or anything, I literally will get worked up the day before. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, that's awful. So how do you stop that? Like, what do you tell your clients? Like, okay, how do you stop that? Do you journal, or what do you do?
All right. So, because I know that you had told me you might want to ask about EMDR. EMDR is a therapy technique that would work perfectly for that incident in your life.
Okay.
EMDR has you imagine something like that, which was a very scary accident, over and over until it becomes desensitized. Mm. But it actually changes how the memory is stored in your brain.
Wow.
So you have that memory stored in your emotional brain. Okay. I call it I use the model of the triune brain, which neuroscientists are going to tell you is not accurate, which is okay because basically it's accurate enough for what people need to understand. Mm-hmm. But we have our reptilian brain, which is our fight, flight, freeze, and our basic drives: eat, sleep, have sex, right? We have the emotional brain, which is where sensory information gets tied to emotion. So you smell something, you like it, that gets recorded in the emotional brain. You smell something, you don't like it, right? Major traumatic events, or like what you went through, will embed in your emotional brain in a very, they get very ingrained in there. Mm. So driving, snow, panic. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we have our frontal lobe, the, human brain that comes on top. And these three parts don't always talk to each other. So your human brain is like, calm down. You've driven in snow 7,000 times. You had an accident once. You're going to be extra careful. You'll be fine. It's okay. And if it's too bad, I won't go. Mm-hmm. Right? If the storm is out of control or it's sleet and ice, I'll cancel. That's your frontal lobe telling you not to worry. But your emotional brain is like, just mm-hmm. in panic. Mm-hmm. So it's really a matter of calming that emotional brain down, right? So I do think the therapy technique of EMDR helps that a lot. Mm-hmm. But without that, I would say being aware of it, just sort of being aware that that's your automatic response, and using mm-hmm. tools like breathing diaphragmatically, mm-hmm. having a cup of tea, soothing yourself rather than trying to berate yourself about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had to go outside before during that kind of thing, and just but it's so hard during a panic attack. Everything is sped up, everything's going, and I can only imagine the people around are like, what is happening? It's like, I'm going to die. It's happening. And so, they never know what to say. And so what do why is it that when people around you that love you and hate seeing you this way, they're like, just relax, you're totally mm-hmm. fine. Why does that not work? Why do you feel even more frustrated? Because I know I do. I'm like, okay, you have no idea what's going on here. Just back off. You're like, I'm losing my mind right now. Okay.
Do you have any pets?
Yes.
What do you have, a dog or a cat?
I have a couple kitties.
Kitties. Okay. Dogs work a little bit better with this example because they tend to be a little more responsive to us. But if do you have a cat that gets nervous about anything?
Not really anymore. They're pretty lazy.
They're chill. All right. So I used to have a dog that was afraid of thunder and lightning, like really afraid of it. So when it was, and fireworks. Okay. So they went together. So anytime we had a thunder or lightning storm or fireworks, the dog panicked, like shaking, drooling, like his whole body would be shaking, right? If I were to say to the dog, calm down, it's just thunder and lightning, is that going to help? No, right? If I'm like, okay, come on, you've been through fireworks 25 times. There's no problem here. Is that going to change the dog? No. So our emotional brain is like the dog. What would you do to calm the dog down?
Pet it, hold it, put it away.
I would get down on the floor. I had a pretty big dog, not a lap dog. I'd get down on the floor. I'd hug him. I'd pet him. I'd lower my voice. I'd talk soothing.
Yeah.
So that's where people get confused, because people tell us to relax. And that's probably the worst thing to say to somebody who's highly anxious. Sometimes it could just be adjusting how you breathe.
Yeah.
Right? If I take a deep breath right now, my guess is that a large number of the people listening or watching are going to be taking deep breaths, mm-hmm. mirror each other. So can I calm my friend down by simply breathing deeply, giving her a hug, right? Just mm-hmm. kind of lowering my voice. Mm-hmm. How can I help? Can I rub your feet? If it's your husband, have him rub your feet. Right?
Yeah.
Can I get a cup of tea for you? It is not about telling you to not be anxious. Right. It's about doing something physiological that's calming for you.
Got you. Yeah, because that's just tough. It's tough for those around you as well, because they're like, I don't know. I mean, you look fine. Like in your mind, you're not fine. So also like meditation, I know it's huge, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Everyone's just like, just meditate. But honestly, when you're going through that and those in that heart of everything, it's so hard to really like just stop and do that. I mean, is that even realistic?
Okay, so no. So I have like a 3-week mini course for free on YouTube. I can give you the link. You can share it with people. I call it the mini series, but it starts with diaphragmatic breathing. And I recommend that people practice diaphragmatic breathing 3 to 4 times a day for 3 weeks. And then there's a safe place exercise, and then there's some grounding exercises. And my recommendation is people practice these regularly when they are not in the midst of a panic attack or high anxiety situation. Developing the skills of how to shift your breathing to diaphragmatic breathing takes time and effort, and you need to be in a reasonable zone of tolerance to be able to do it. And then once you practice it, then it becomes something you can pull on when you are in an anxious situation.
I think in one of your videos I was watching, it said you should just basically get used to breathing like this, right?
Yep.
I am working on that. I'm definitely working on that. And it is helpful. And even that like alternate nostril breathing, I'm working on that.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Well, you know what it is? It's like you can almost get anxious about meditating. Like, am I doing it right? Am I doing, you can get distracted and just feel like, I mean, can you do anything right? But with that, you're really focusing on just the breathing, just the actual technique, which is really helping you focus on the breath. I notice just practicing that, it's helpful.
I call that little mini course almost like a precursor to meditation. Like if you're a very anxious person or you've had a fair amount of trauma or whatever, practice these techniques for a couple weeks, a couple months, and then begin to try to sit in more of a pure meditation.
Okay.
Because you're learning the tools to physiologically calm yourself down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it will be easier to move into some type of meditation practice.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely going to link that with that because I think that's so helpful because I feel like you said, it is like everyone's meditating and you're like, you're right. Like you need to start somewhere. And that's a great place to start. Well, I thought we would transition a little bit here I loved watching you talk about identifying your core beliefs and how that can help us with anxiety, just improving the quality of our lives in general. So how does identifying our core beliefs help us with those things?
So what I've found is that most people have between 1 and 3 core negative beliefs that really you could take almost any situation in their lives, you can drill down and get to a very core basic statement, and it will be very similar among any situation. We develop these core beliefs very young when, as a child, your understanding of the world is limited and fairly egocentric, not in a bad way, but in a way of like, kids think they cause everything, right? They think that everything happens because they did something wrong or they did something bad, when actually when you get some perspective, you realize like, no, that stuff was happening with or without me, right? But that personalization of things that happens to kids, right, tends to get ingrained. So a common one for like a panic attack situation. Oh, and I have a good example I could share with you, but a panic attack type situation, often the core statement is something about being in danger, not being safe, right? So being able to identify that, then you can begin to work on feeling safe enough. Like right in this moment, just this moment right here, listening to this podcast or this YouTube video, can I take a deep breath and realize right now I'm pretty safe just in this moment, right? And then you can start practicing with that.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I want to share two examples. One is that when I very first became trained in EMDR, and EMDR uses this concept of negative core beliefs, so does CBT and a number, and, you know, it's also used sometimes in meditation or Buddhist circles. My first time getting trained, I was working with other clinicians. We were just in a training, and I worked with somebody who was afraid of flying. And so with the process, she brought up that fear, what that felt like for her. And then you have the person float back to an early memory that connects. And she floated back to a very early memory, being 5 or 6 years old, playing with a group of kids, some siblings, some neighborhood kids, and getting locked in like a small storage space. Mm. And she felt like she was locked in there for a very, very long time. Now she was 5 or 6, maybe it was a couple hours, but she was in a panic, which makes total sense, right? The kids just didn't know what they were doing. It's not like anybody intended to cause her harm. It was a game. It went awry. Mm-hmm. In any case, that core memory, right, got lodged in that emotional brain with that feeling of not being safe. And she carried that throughout her life. And then anytime she was in a situation where she was enclosed, that emotional brain is saying panic, 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 right? So being able to identify that it's a feeling of being in danger, then you can start working on feeling safe. And I just want to bring up one other situation, which was I was working with a client on boundaries, and she realized that she often tried to take care of other people's problems. Like her role in her family and her friends was to like help other people, help them feel better, or help fix things, right? Like I think a lot of us can relate to, right?
Yeah.
And when she really drilled into it, she realized that at the bottom of all of that was this feeling that she wasn't safe. Mm. And so bringing that to mind, she was able to say to herself, okay, even if this person has this problem and I can't solve it, I'm safe enough. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Well, what about, I think many people have problems with that whole negative, negativity bias, the negative self-talk, or just the inner feeling or inner belief of, maybe I'm not enough, or I don't have as much. And how does that play out? With like not wanting to go to social events or just kind of social type things. I mean, how does that play out if it's something more like just those inner negative beliefs or feeling of unworthiness?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of times the negative core belief could be I'm not good enough, or I'm defective, or I'm lacking in some way, right? Or I'm very different. I'm different in a bad way. Mm-hmm. And if that's your core belief, that will interrupt your social interactions, because that's what's going to be going around and around in your mind when you enter into a social situation. Mm-hmm.
So how do you begin? What steps, when you're working with that, what steps can you take to kind of overcome those those core beliefs and maybe develop healthier ones?
Yeah, so I get these questions a lot, right? And this is a process. This takes work, right? It probably takes work working with somebody, right? Now, I provide a lot of more self-help material, or, I also have sort of a online program that leads people through the steps. And I do think sometimes we can do this on our own. But first would be really identifying what that negative core belief is, making some connection to why did that form, right? Like if my core belief is I'm stupid, and I was, I'm thinking of a client who was the third of 3 boys, and his older brothers were very, very smart. Now he wasn't stupid. He just was 4 years younger than the oldest and 2 years younger than the next one. But they would tease him that he was stupid. It got really ingrained in there. And then it becomes an identifying thing. So when you can put those pieces together and see the event that impacted you when you were a child with the adult point of view and realize, oh, actually it had nothing to do with me. It was simply my birth order, right? Then you can begin to really change that self-concept on a deep level.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And so it often takes working with somebody else for the perspective, because we all have these lenses through which we see the world, right? We have, my lens says this about the world and this about me. And it can be very hard to clear that lens and see things clearly. So that's why often working with somebody is helpful.
And you have a great video about that too. I mean, that's kind of where I wanted to talk about this, because you were so good about explaining how it's different for everybody. Like your inner beliefs, I think that what you were talking about had nothing to do with what you're wearing. So you didn't care, but where somebody else might be like, why are you wearing that? Or, it's like it's different for every person. And,
right.
And it's interesting how you put that into perspective, and like how we take that out, or how one person's worrying about one thing and nobody's even thinking about that thing. It's like really this perspective of just changing, and also taking the focus off yourself. Maybe, I think that is a good thing too. Like,
yeah,
not even worried about you, they're not, we shouldn't think that they are worried about us. And I think that's so limiting. So I guess when we're talking about those social situations and social anxiety, I guess is what I'm thinking about, how do we know that we're more having that kind of a thing versus just being shy or an introvert? Because I kind of think I'm an introvert, it's like, well, am I really anxious about social situations, or do I really just enjoy, reading a book and hanging out alone?
Right. So introverts, and I'm balanced between the two, but I have a strong introverted side, and introverts love to recharge by themselves. Right. Extroverts like to recharge by being with other people. It's like sort of an easy way to see the difference. So for social events, for an introvert, will be more tiring, right? They might be like, okay, like I want to go, I want to see these people, but I might prefer to only talk to 2 or 3 people, right? Not try to talk to all 50 people who are at this gathering. I only want to talk to a couple. I want to have deeper conversations, and I'm probably only going to stay an hour and a half. And I'm okay with all that. That's an introvert. Okay. I'm afraid to go to this event because I don't know what to wear, and people will criticize me, and I'm going to say something stupid. And, oh, what do I have in common with these people? They look at me like I'm weird and different. And that's social anxiety. Right. Now you can have both. People can be both introverted and have social anxiety, but it's really like, what's the motivation? Because if I choose not to go to a party to stay home and read a book, awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But if I'm, and it's also where the focus is. I mean, I've had clients with social anxiety who, can't even go into a coffee shop and order a coffee. They get so self-conscious about how they look or how people will respond. And there's a combination of self-criticism and thinking I'm defective combined with some kind of fear. There's right. If it's anxiety, there's a fear piece in it, right? Like if I'm different than other people, I'm in danger. If I get criticized or ostracized, I'm in danger. Right.
So what do you recommend in those situations? Because you can't just go isolate, because that's not good for your health.
No, I recommend
you have to get out there, but can be overwhelming, especially, with big social settings that you kind of sometimes have to go to. You have to go to maybe a wedding or whatever, Yeah.
So this is where I recommend people take time. Right? Like you don't, like with my shoulder. Okay. For those who don't know, I dislocated my shoulder. That could have been 4 to 6 weeks, but since I also have a rotary cuff tear, it will be much longer than that. And then if it doesn't heal with physical therapy, it'll be an operation, right? It could be a 9-month process. I am hoping it's not, but it could be. Okay. So let's say I am 40 years old. I've had social anxiety my whole life. I want to fix it in 6 YouTube videos. Right. Not going to happen.
Right.
Right. see a therapist, see a specialist, right? Begin to do the healing work. Where did you learn that social situations were scary? What made you think you were so different? There probably were events. A lot of people with social anxiety had bullying traumas, I've found, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can you process those? How can you go through them, lower the intensity of those in your emotional brain? This stuff takes work. It does not, right? There's no sound bite to solve the problem, right? But to know that you really truly can get over this stuff, like really truly, it's actually the good thing about anxiety is you can like fully recover from anxiety, but it takes learning, it takes self-exploration, it takes integrating a lot of different techniques, right? And then, as you said, practicing, right? Because with the social anxiety, you do need to go out to this, you have to learn to like go to that coffee store, order that cup of coffee, and when everything goes fine and you're not in danger, that's the only thing that's really communicating to that emotional brain.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you can really overcome anxiety, like just really get over it in your life, because I feel like there's times with my own self, I'm like doing great, nothing more, not worrying about a whole lot. And then for me, it's more like health related, like, I'm in the field that I'm in, I'm constantly seeing stuff and I'm like, any little thing that feels different, suddenly my mind's like back at it again. So is there any way to truly overcome it for good?
So again, if we think about anxiety as a normal emotion, nobody is ever going to not have anxiety again in their life unless there's like some other problem, probably, right? You will have anxiety. So yeah. But that doesn't mean you have an anxiety disorder or a major problem, or it doesn't have to spin into something that's preoccupying all the time. So yes, in that way, I think people can get over anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. Just like my mind, I'm like, well, but that's the thing. I think in our society, honestly, it's hard to actually take time to put the work in on ourselves, but it would be just amazing if we actually did it, and how much healing it would be for us all to do some of those things that we're going to talk about in a minute. But also I wanted you to talk about catastrophizing, because I think we do that.
Hard word.
That is a really hard word. A lot of people do that. Like, yeah, even our kids or whatever, everyone hates me, or everyone, how do we, how can we stop doing that? Like, what are some examples, and how can we kind of take some action steps to stop doing that?
Well, I think being aware of what some of the cognitive distortions are that drive anxiety and other, negative self-talk, right? So that example of everyone hates me, that's really generalizing. It's taking a specific situation where you think one person hates you, or even 3 people hate you, which they probably don't, and then generalizing it. You are making it bigger than it is, right? And almost all statements that include always, never, or all are false. They're distortions, right? Some people don't like me. Well, that's kind of a true statement.
Right.
Yes, I could name them, right? But some people like me, right? So learning not to generalize, right? And then catastrophizing is going into the future and coming up with the absolute worst result, right? So somebody's having trouble at work and they think, oh, I'm going to get fired. And then if I get fired, I'll lose my apartment and I won't be able to find another job. And then my spouse will leave me and then I'll be homeless on the street, right? So it goes from a problem at work to a worst possible scenario, right? So the first step is really awareness, right? And becoming aware of these thought patterns, and the fact that when you do that, when you make up that story, your body is experiencing it as if it's almost happening. So you're actually creating that adrenaline cortisol cycle, which is then going to make your muscles tense, your heart race, your blood pressure go up, all of that stuff, just by thinking that through. Right? And what would it look like if I imagined something different? Okay, I'm having this problem at work, and I'm going to go and talk to a coworker who's really good in this area and ask them if they'll give me some tips. And maybe I need to talk to my boss about going for some more training and let my boss know I really want to change. I really want to fix this problem. And then I fix it. And next year I get promoted, and then I can buy a bigger house, right? You can make up a story in either direction.
Right.
Right. But what's important is, what can I do about it right now? So the positive story leads me to a more adaptive, what do I need to do about this right now? Right.
It's more logical. You're like, you're kind of thinking, it's more action, just taking action about what I can do instead of, being overwhelmed with it, which I think we've all done, I mean, I see it all the time, but like taking more action. I got you. It's just like, it's so, and I feel like kids really struggle with this a lot, even in this day and age with social, with the social media, and just even my own kids, I've seen it. It's like, no, there might be a few people, but it's not everybody. But it's easy to get in that where you really feel like it is everybody, you just kind of get more isolated, and it's just awful. So I guess I can see the benefit, especially there, with working with somebody that can help you, okay, this is how you're viewing it, but this is how it might really be. And maybe getting that process out, I can see where that's really beneficial for that. So when is anxiety a disorder versus just some anxiety? Like, is that, when do we know we might need more help than just talking it out or whatever, or even needing to go talk to somebody?
Yeah. So, disorders are diagnosed, right, by doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, right? And for every single anxiety disorder, there's 6 criteria, and you have to get this many in this column and that many in that column. And then it has to create a significant problem in your life, whether it's in your social life, your academic life, occupational, physical also, I guess. Yet, I don't always know that that's the best way to think about it, right? Like, because it sort of stigmatizes the problem. I mean, so many people are anxious, like you said, like people like watching that, like, who's not anxious about what's going on in the world, right?
Right.
So if your anxiety is really impacting your life, I'd say reach out for help. And whether, if you want to start with the self-help mode of reading a few books, watching some videos, great. If you want to reach out to a coach who works in the field, awesome. If you want to go to a therapist, great, right? But begin the process. Like, you don't have to have a formal diagnosis or a formal disorder to want to live with less anxiety.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's just, and there's so much out there, and it's just, you're right. Like, everybody is anxious, and it's just kind of become such a thing that you're sometimes like, well, I know everybody's anxious, but maybe I need some help. You know what I mean? It's like,
okay. So, but also it's like, we do this comparing thing. Yeah. Well, I'm really anxious, but I'm actually not even as anxious as my best friend, or my mom is really anxious, or like, blah, blah. Yeah. Who cares?
Like, they need help. I don't.
Right. Well, that's what happens. If you're like, okay, I'm really anxious, it's keeping me up at night. I'm worried about my health. So I'm like spending hours on Google researching all these diseases. And then I think I have 7 of them, but I'm really not as anxious as these other people. Who cares?
Yeah.
If you're not happy, like, you can, right. It comes back to, again, what can I do about this? Right. So there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of self-help. And rather than focusing on, it depends on personality. For some people, it's helpful to look at, okay, let me see if I actually do qualify for social anxiety or not. But if I'm struggling in social situations, does it really matter whether I qualify or not?
Right. It's just having that awareness. Like, I can't live like this. You can't live like that, right? Yeah. You have to get help. Yeah. So what do you think works best for anxiety? What tools do you find that are the most helpful?
Again, it's an integrative process and it takes time, right? There's no there's no quick fix. It's really, and it's also about like learning to really change some habitual patterns, right? So how do I change the habitual pattern of how I'm thinking, right? Which is a little bit what you've been asking me. Like, if I tend to think this way, how do I change that, right? Well, first is developing awareness. What helps develop awareness? Well, therapy can, self-help, reading, coaching, meditation, right? So meditation actually strengthens that part of our brain that's an observer. Strengthens that part of the brain that's like, ooh, there I go again. Okay. You know, the observer becomes stronger and stronger and is able to eventually be like, this is catastrophizing and I have a choice here. Right. So all of those sort of techniques help with the awareness, and then having the tools and techniques once you're aware to begin to shift. What can I do to change this thought pattern? Do I, like you said earlier, like sometimes you just have to go outside. Feel the sunlight in the air on your skin. I agree, right? Sometimes we just have to go for a walk or a run. Am I getting enough exercise? Exercise is a natural release of a lot of the tension that we build up, right? Am I getting enough sleep? What behaviors do I need to change in my life? Right? And so it's really working kind of on all of those fronts.
What is when, we hear a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy. It's like, honestly, and I know it's first line therapy for anxiety. What exactly is that? Like when people are like, well, you just need to go get some therapy. Like how would you just tell them, what does that mean? Like, it's, people in the medical field, they don't know what that means. You know what I mean? So what are we doing when we go to cognitive behavioral therapy? And is that enough, for most people? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, it's like, I guess it's, it can really be enough, I guess is what I'm saying. You don't have to be put on medication, which is maybe a possibility you get to, but you know what I'm saying? Like what is it and how does it work?
Okay. So cognitive behavioral therapy is based on the concept that our behaviors, thoughts, and feelings are all integrated. Right. So the way that I explain is that people always want to change how they feel. They're like, I feel anxious. I don't want to feel anxious. But you actually can't change your feelings directly. You have to first change either your thoughts or your behaviors. So it's very popular in our society right now, Instagram, everything, change how you think, change how you think.
Right.
Yep. But sometimes you have to actually change the behavior. So if you go to a CBT therapist, they will work with you on what thinking patterns and what behaviors are contributing to the feeling that's a problem for you, and help you figure out where you can intervene. Where can you either just change the thought pattern or where can you change the behavior?
And it's effective for people losing weight too, because I think a lot of that is behavioral. Right.
Yeah.
So it can be effective for many different things, not just anxiety, but yeah, I just think sometimes, you're so right. It's like, change your thoughts, change your life. It's like, well, it might not be that simple. You have to put some work in there too, Yeah. It sounds really good. I love it.
Yeah.
But,
and your question about, is CBT enough? I'd say for the most part, no.
Okay.
CBT is meant to be a relatively short-term therapy. So if somebody has been in CBT therapy for 4 years and not really making changes in their life, the therapy is not working. Okay. Often people have to go to the root traumas that impacted or created these negative thoughts about themselves, or created the cycle of panic or whatever. And a therapy technique that integrates that, such as an EMDR, can really kind of get to the root of it. So CBT has great research and can work well on a lot of things. I would generally say if you've been doing CBT and really trying for 6 months and it's not working, I would then move to something that's has a different focus. So it could be a more somatic kind of therapy. It could be dialectical behavior therapy. EMDR is something I'm a proponent of. And then the question of medication, and again, since you're a nurse, you may have more information on this than me, because I'm not a doctor. I don't prescribe. But the research shows that there's certain anxiety disorders that benefit from mostly SSRIs, which are actually antidepressants. So anti-anxiety medications, this is just my personal view, and this might end up being controversial, can make the problem worse. An anti-anxiety medication like a benzodiazepine, which is a Xanax or Valium, actually sets your body up on a biphasic cycle. So it's a little bit more like having a drink of alcohol. It gives you a feeling of relaxation, but then it leaves your body with fewer relaxation chemicals. Right? So alcohol, for example, tends to work on a 24-hour cycle. So if people have their drink at 6 o'clock, 10 to 6 the next night, they're going to be making their drink. And it works on, right? Because your body is telling you need it. So I do not feel that anxiety benefits from alcohol, benzodiazepines at all. And I feel they're overprescribed, and then people stay on them way too long. And I believe also, I feel like, and again, there is research on this, but this is controversial. Just want your audience to know that there is research that shows you can develop a panic disorder with long-time use of a benzo.
Wow.
So you have to be very careful. However, the SSRIs, the antidepressants, have been shown to really help social anxiety, OCD, and I think in some cases health anxiety, because health anxiety works in a similarly kind of like that obsessive part of the brain. So that in combination with therapy can sometimes be helpful. But I always, when I would work, and again, I'm not doing psychotherapy anymore, but when I was doing it, I would always encourage the person to give it a good 6 to 9 months in therapy to see if your anxiety improves without the medication.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you don't have to be putting something into your body is a good thing. But I guess it all just depends on the situation. But definitely, I feel like so much of anxiety is just rooted in fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of something happening to you, or fear of happening to somebody you love, or just all of that. And it's like, if you could just get to the root of that, it would probably, with the cognitive behavioral therapy, would be so helpful. But it's actually like investing in yourself and recognizing you have a problem, and then just being willing to take that next step is probably so helpful, as opposed to turning to medication that isn't necessarily going to solve your poor inner self beliefs, or the way you handle social situations, or whatever. I can see so much more of the therapy being beneficial, but it's just investing in yourself and being able to do it. And with the stuff that you even offer, just the free tools and resources, just like starting there, like you said, can be so helpful, and ultimately improving your overall physical health. Because I know from experience, it's not helpful. It's not healthy. It robs you of not only your joy, but of your health. You start having those physical symptoms and getting yourself in this whole cycle. And not only that, I feel like it's so helpful to heal yourself, because you do pass it on. Like, I feel like my mom kind of gave that to me, that constant worry. And then I find myself doing that to my kids, if they don't text me back right away or whatever. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like, I don't want them to be like worried, like I'm worried, so I can see the benefit of like healing yourself. So you don't keep passing it on.
I think that's a big motivation for people. When you become a parent, you're like, oh, I've got to work on a few things here, because I want to create different patterns going forward, right? Because we pass things down. But then I also really try to encourage people not to beat yourself up, right? Because what happens is people will be like, oh my God, and now I know I'm doing this, and now, I've damaged my children. It's
like, anxious.
And then you get anxious about that. So it's always good to just start on the process of trying to figure out how can you live with a little more peace and joy. And all right, like things are going to happen that are out of my control.
Right. Yeah. Well, what do you have? Like, what do you have upcoming? What do you have going on right now to pass on? Sure. What are you working on?
Yeah. So I have a free PDF called Transform Your Negative Core Beliefs. If you want to download it, let me know what you think. Oh, you did? Okay, great.
I did that.
And so that is, I think it's useful because it helps walk through the process of identifying it, and then it gives a few tools. I have a free webinar called Rewiring Your Brain for Joy and Confidence. I was forgetting the name for a second, but it really talks a little bit more about what I was talking about the triune brain and how we get wired, and then the work we have to do to rewire it. And then I have an online program, which is 6 months long. It's pre-recorded video material. There's a small Facebook group. I was live in it this morning, actually talking about boundaries and how they integrate with this concept of the negative core beliefs. But the 6-month program is something that people are having huge success in. And it really kind of guides you through this process of, okay, step by step, let's first become more aware of some of this. Let's learn to meditate, or at least do some of that self-calming. Then let's try to figure out how the brain is wired, why I got wired this way, what can I do about it? It's very action oriented, like what behaviors would be helpful for me to put in place to bring a little more joy or relaxation or peace in right away today, right? Because then that becomes reinforcing. So that's really what I have to offer. And then my YouTube channel, which hopefully I will continue. And I am building out a new program, but I'll wait before announcing that one.
All right. Well, what is the name of the YouTube channel again? Where can everybody follow you?
So my name, Barbara Heffernan, and my YouTube channel is under, it's www.youtube.com/C/Barbara Heffernan. And then my website is awakenjoy.life. So www.awakenjoy, AWAKENJOY.life.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for all you do. Thanks for talking. It's been great. And just providing all the resources and everything is just awesome. And it's so needed. So thank you for everything. And thank you for being here.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for the work you're putting out there in the world too. It's awesome. Yeah. And I'm so impressed that you're doing this on top of everything else you're doing.
All right. Well, maybe we can talk again sometime.
That'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
Awesome.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye, Kimberly.
Bye.